Happy New Year, folks. Thanks for joining this great webinar today. I would like to introduce ourselves. My name is Satish. I'm one of the co-founders of Innoppl, and I also have Karthik. He's a CTO who has been with data analytics for the last 10 plus years. Hi, Karthik. So we'll quickly jump into our presentation today. We'd like to talk about the most hot topic of with many people talking about AI, how the data world is going to change with AI. So with all these happening around us, with AI taking over the data and taking it, presenting it in a different format, data governance is the most important aspect in 2024 rather than in any other period.
Sorry to interrupt, Satish. Hello, everyone. This is Karthik again. For audience, like we are recording this meeting, we will be sending a copy of this presentation at the end of this call, and we'll also be sharing the recording as well. So if you have, during the course of this webinar, if you have any specific questions, you can put it on the chat we have muted all the audiences for now. So any questions you can have, you can put it on the chat. We'll be able to answer either in this call or we can take it separately. Okay. Thanks, Satish. Sorry for interrupting. Okay, proceed.
That's fine, Karthik. So if you guys have any questions, please feel to stop or put it in the chat. We'd be happy to answer those questions. As I was telling you earlier, data governance is the most important topic for all the enterprises now, because with people introducing LLM on the organizations, the data is being handled in multiple ways, and people who are not supposed to have access to certain data are easily getting access to those data through these new AI and LLMs. So we'll cover all these topics today, why this governance audit is important and who has to do it, what is the best way and what would be the average price, and all these things we'll cover as part of this presentation. Next slide, please. So we'll start with what is data governance audit. So data governance audit is basically how your data is being governed across your organization, like the actual data strategy that is present in your organization. Many organizations don't follow a better data strategy, and that's why you see all these hacking and people are losing data by the scammers. So if they don't have a proper data strategy around their organization, they also spend a lot of money in databases, the time to get the right information. All these things get skewed up. So it is highly important for a company to have a better data strategy. And the most important thing, you have to do with regular audits, whether you have all the right people have the right information, whether you have enough security across the data, and whether you guys have the right technologies in your place to access these data, and even the redundancy in your organization. If your customer data is stored across multiple databases, you need to cut them down and have one single database as a source of truth. So we highly recommend this kind of audits to be done at a regular intervals. Next slide, please. So why is data governance audit important? Go ahead, next slide, Pratik. So as I said, first thing is definitely the data security. We need to make sure that your data is being secured, and for example, your credit card data, all these things are compliant, all these things we need to be aware. And the next one is the data accuracy. Like many companies still struggle when have to reach out to the data analyst or data engineers to find a perfect dashboard, or for some decision making, whatever data you need, you always need to reach them. And that's the time they work aggressively to figure out what data to present to you. So if you have a better data governance plan, you can create this kind of a data accuracy and reaching out to the right data pretty easily. The next slide, please. The other one is the streamlining your data management. The most important thing is always you need to make sure that your data is not stored across multiple databases. Make sure that you try to avoid this kind of multiple data storage, because that's where the data is getting lost and you don't know who is having access to which data. So try to minimize, avoid redundancy. So that's another important aspect. And the next one is the regulatory compliance. Like, for example, GDPR is highly followed in Europe region, and CCPA. We have to be accountable for all these compliances, because when you lose your data, you also need to inform your uh, customers about the customers who got affected. You need to inform them. So there are so many compliances you need to follow. So to be following those things, you also need to audit how you're standing in terms of the regulatory compliances. The next one. So the other important thing is the proactive risk management mitigation. So generally, any data breaches or any financial damages for your organization, all these risk mitigations, you need to be proactively evaluating whether if there is anything. You need to find out. You can find through this kind of audits, regular audits. And the other important thing is stakeholder collaboration. So basically, when you're doing data, when people who are using data, the decision makers, the business people, the data engineers, all needs to sit together at some point and understand what kind of data they are looking for and what is the purpose they are serving for. So whenever you start doing a data governance audit, or creating a data strategy, all the stakeholders would be sitting across and talking about why they need that data. So for that also, it is highly important at a frequent meeting with all the data team members. So next slide, please, Kathy. And the data governance audit, who is it for? The next slide, please. So in our opinion, like data governance should be across for everybody who's in the organization, should be useful, but highly people that are very important to follow is like the data owners, data auditors, data consumers, data delegates, data analysts, and the data consumers generally would be the business folks or decision makers, and data custodians like data DB admin, all these things would needs to be aware of this audit, and they should be taking part with this audit. Next slide. So how to conduct a data governance audit is another important thing. Like you need to understand what are the elements or how to start with the project. So the first one would be like when you're doing a data governance audit, you need to set a clear objective for your organization, like what this audit needs to cover and what are the compliances you have, and what are the legal requirements your industry has. All these things you need to be aware. And your data quality assessment, you need to also talk to your data analyst whether they are able to get the proper data in a quicker time. All these things you need to look into it and identify what are the risks your organization generally have, and try to have one common meeting across your team, like the at least the data and people who are using data look into those things to see what are the people have access to what kind of tools and data, and also review all the technology and tools that your organization uses, and definitely look into the performance metric reports, what are the dashboards your organization follows, and documentations, all these things you can look into it. Next slide, please, Karthik. So the other important question companies have is who to conduct the data governance audit. So the data governance audit can be conducted by your internal team or an external team, external auditors. But we highly recommend to do it by an external audit team, because the internal team will know the do's and don'ts of all your company systems. So they will ideally will be reporting everything is looking good, everything is following positively. But if you work with an external auditors, they would be the one who knows what the industry standards are and what will be the ways they will be accessing the data. The externals would be accessing the data, and they bring with a lot of information like, hey, these type of users should not have to get an access to these kind of data. So those kind of information, they generally bring it to the table. That's why we always recommend to do an frequent external auditing for your customers. So the next slide, please, Karthik. The first step, uh, actually, if you take data governance audit, there are generally 6 steps involved. The first step, as I said, is to identify the objectives, the criterias, your privacy policy, and all other important aspect. You need to document that to the auditing team. So, and it needs to be approved by all the team members in the data team. So the next step is, so the next step too is you have to collect all the data from different data sources. In case if you guys have a metadata or data lineage, you need to collect all those informations and see whether those data are utilized properly by the tools that you guys have. So you need to collect all the data from various sources, like what are the sources and everything. So next slide, please. And the evaluating data quality, again, an important piece like your security. There are tools out there in the market that would make sure that the site has secure data framework in the database. And the quality of your data is, as I said earlier, it needs to be from the data team, whether they are able to access the data properly faster, and also from the business team, whether the reported dashboards or the built AI system is reporting the data accurately. Because with AI, a lot of times we see a wrong data being thrown out through LLMs. So always we need to talk with the business users to make sure whether they are getting the right kind of data and they could make a right decisions with the data that's thrown out of the system. The step 4, can you, yeah. Again, you have to, with step 4, it's basically, is there any risk or any gaps or any um, time that your data team is not able to access data because there's no proper backup, all these things we need to identify on this step. We generally recommend to utilize some kind of tools to optimize, identify any data issues or any gaps through this process. The next step is once the tools are finding the reports, we also need to look into your the dashboards and reports that the teams is finding and report them to the actual customers and recommend them like what is the best possible way to fix the data issues that you're having. In case if there is any legal issues, recommend that what you could, how you can take an action to fix those things. Can you go to the step 6, Karthik? And in case if we identify any issues, report the data issues to the concerned owner. In case if there's a data breach, report it to the actual customers itself. And then after reporting that, legally that is required by enterprises. After reporting that, they can start working on a better action plan, like how to make their site secure, how to avoid redundancy, how to make their data more linear, like if they have not built a data lineage, that's an easier way to build it so that they can access the data faster. All these things we could improve as part of the audit plan. With that, I'd like Karthik to take over from here. Any questions, guys?
Thanks, Satish.
All right.
Hello everyone. Thanks for joining again. And this is Karthik. I'm one of the CTO as well as a data scientist, by certified data scientist. I've been traveling on this technical versus data kind of a world for the last 10 years. I worked with bigger insurance companies and e-commerce businesses with complex data. Analytics softwares and data warehouse managements, and we have done plenty of data governance in this process. So the idea of what we are trying to show here is like we have been reading the word data governance law as well as whenever we talk about data integrity, quality, and all those kind of matrices. So how to successfully do a data governance audit, or how to measure the success of it, right? So that is what we are going to see here. So we have the data governance audit is kind of distributed into like five major aspects. So one is the architecture, the data architecture and models. So a business, if you take, they have they would be having lots of independent silos that are operating on their own, and they kind of manage each silos manage the data independently. So there are lots of businesses, even enterprise level businesses, who have who have like not connected silos together. Data originates from one particular silo, and that it doesn't translate it to another different process. And during that kind of data transformation, the data quality gets impacted. The data might get lost, or it might be even might be fraud data happens. So you have to define the data architecture and models in such a way you have and you show that you can measure the quality and of the data model. So when we say data model measurement, like for example, we have to, from the model accuracy perspective, we have to measure the degree of to which data models capture all the necessary data entities and the relationships. So we have to make sure any data that originates have a proper data source, and that data source or entity has been properly tied up with all the relationships that it has with all the other data entities. And when it comes to data model compliances with standards, we have to assess whether the data models adheres to industry standards, and we have to check for compliances with data modeling conventions, naming standards, and design principles. Okay. And when it comes to integration and interoperability, we have to evaluate the effectiveness of data models in terms of data exchanges across different platforms and systems. Whether the data exchange can be seamlessly done between different systems. So, or there is and who has the access to do those when it transforms to from one system to another system. What kind of rules that we have deployed, and the end system users, or they have the correct roles and permissions to view the data in the format they wanted to view it. So that's basically very important. And from the scalability and performance standpoint, we have to make sure the data architecture model that we build should be scalable, so that when data volume grows and complexity grows, the data model should be capable of handling those big data volumes. And version controlling and change management is very critical, because all the softwares that we are using will be there will be like periodic updates and changes going to happen on the databases. So we have to establish a process of tracking the history of changes, ensuring smooth transitions happening between the model versions, and minimizing the disruptions during this kind of version controlling and change management process. And obviously, metadata management is a very effective, critical aspect in any data governance audits. It involves accessing how metadata is captured, maintained, and utilized to enhance the understanding and usability of data models. Okay. Documentation at all levels of data model creations. the quality of the documentation, assessing and also the ease of understanding for all the stakeholders involved in the data modeling process should be considered when you create data model documentations. Okay. Feedback and from stakeholders feedback, and not only just stakeholders, people who who are involved in the process of handling the data in the entire life cycle, getting the feedback from them, and changing it according to their kind of feedbacks is very critical in creating the data architecture and models. So you need to have a proper data architecture so that so that you, Satish talked about having like one central source of truth. That's very vital. So basically, you need to have a proper architecture so that you have everything is governed in one kind of area, but at the same time, we have to democratize data so that individuals have access to the data as well. That's another aspect. Centralizing the data, but at the same time, giving access to everyone who needs it at the right time. Okay. And then the second aspect is data quality. How you can measure the data quality. So first is accuracy rate. So the percentage of data that is correct and error-free, that is what is considered as accuracy rate. So this is very important in decisions. If you have like errored data, your decisions or your predictions will get affected. And the second data quality metrics is completeness rate. So it's the extent to which the required data fields are populated, like or like how say a particular data, like how much is of completed data with incomplete data, right? So the more the data is complete, the more the accuracy is. Okay. And then the consistency rate needs to be, that's another KPI we will monitor for data quality. So consistency is basically the uniformity of data across the different systems. And if you have like, under different systems and silos or data sets, right? How this data is being uniformly kind of captured across the systems. That's very critical. And reducing the data duplication rate. So technically, that's where this metadata, comes into a key role, and, different data warehouses have different mechanisms like streams, and, managements and of reducing the duplicates. So technically, if you are having the same data repeated in multiple places, in what ways you can reduce the duplication rate of the data. That's another metrics we used to do when we kind of, monitor the data quality. And data timeliness. Typical, it's like how up to date is the data, and how quickly it is available to a respective team or an individual person who is really need the data at the right time. So that's another kind of a quality metrics we can analyze. And data validity rate. So like there are, data as certain data has validity rate. So technically we have to measure, specific formats and value ranges, whether the data is in the correct format and within the acceptable ranges for processing. Okay, that's basically data validity rate. And data accessibility is again like how easily users can access it as when they are needed it. Okay. And depending upon the industry standards, whether your particular data is following the compliance standards of that particular industry. And data usage frequency is another metrics we evaluate to check the data quality. It's basically talks about tracking how frequently data is accessed and used. A particular data, how frequently it is being changed or used. So that frequency is kind of measured with data usage frequency. Okay. And again, like stakeholders kind of satisfactions with the data quality, how often you conduct periodic meetings with stakeholders and, understand their kind of data needs and change your system according to that. And the other important thing is like error detection and resolution rate. Measure the effectiveness of, if a data error occurs on the on your data, architecture, right? How quickly you identify it and how quickly you rectify it, or how quickly you give a resolution to fixing that error. So that's another metrics we kind of, because you cannot avoid data errors 100%. Even though you do like all this governance and improve your quality, there might be some scenarios you might end up with data errors. So there has to be a process where you have to identify it and rectify it as quickly as possible. And the data decay rate is like how quickly data becomes outdated or obsolete, right? So that is another metrics we evaluate when you evaluate data quality. Any questions here? Right. So the third important part on a data governance is data management, right? So as we talked about data availability, measuring the extent to which the data is readily accessible when needed by all the authorized users. And usability is again like which users can understand, if the users should be able to understand and use the data. If the users will not be able to understand the data, there is no use of giving the data to that particular user. Okay. And data integrity is basically evaluating the accuracy and consistency of the data across the organization. And again, security compliances and storage efficiency. It's the cost effectiveness and optimization of storage. Like how effective is your data storage efficiency technically is like when these kind of data audits are done, our goal would be to reduce the data storage and improve the data processing time and availability to the end users. Okay. And again, like master data management, which is again like something related to metadata and master data management effectiveness, and data lifecycle management. How long the data, from the start, from the moment it is created till it ends, reaches to the end user who is going to use the data effectively. So what is the process we are following in that entire lifecycle management? That's another important thing that we have to monitor. And data incident response is whenever some incident has happened, it might be a security breach or it might be a compliance breach, how quickly that has been identified and responded back to correct that issues. So that's another aspect that we have to verify during these data governance audits. Okay. And from the security standpoint, it's basically there are that's a very critical topic when it comes to data governance and data security. People always get confused with data security and data governance. So data security is part of the data governance. It's not like the entire scope. So like when we do data governance audits, we have to be very careful with certain metrics like data breach frequency. If some data breaches happened, we have to have the ability to track the number of data breaches or security incidents over a given period of time. And we should be able to introduce access control violation monitoring so that will be able to monitor unauthorized access attempts or violations of access control policies. Okay. And then data encryption coverage measures the proportion of sensitive data that is encrypted. And security training and awareness. We have to make sure across the organization, the data importance, security, and governance has to be educated, and proper training and our awareness are being placed across the organization. And we should have the ability to also monitor the people whether they have taken all the proper trainings on the data usage and data security aspect, compliance aspects, and all those things are effectively translated to all the users who use the data. Okay. And patch management is tracking the timeliness and success rate of applying security patches on the database or all the technology stacks that you're using. And you should also have an audit trial process to measure the quality of logging and monitoring for data accesses and modifications that you're doing on the backend. Okay. And third-party security compliances is like any outside, third-party integrations that we are using that is going to directly integrate with your external, any external, sources that going to, directly connect and get data. So we have to make sure those third-party integrations are all complying with your industry compliances. Okay. And so with all these things, there are tools that gives you like, a specific scores for, your security audits, your management audits, and all the different aspects that we are talking here. Okay. The last part of the data audit is.
One quick thing, sorry to interrupt. We got two questions.
Yeah, you want to take this, Satish?
Yeah, the first question.
What is data lineage? Could you please give more details?
Yeah. So the data lineage is all about like like in metadata or index is what we called in data world. So basically it stores the information about, for example, any database or any table. It has an information what this table contains, what are the rows it contains, like an high level information. Generally, when someone is trying to access a table or database, they generally refer the data lineage, and they could easily figure out what this table contains, everything pretty easily. It saves time when you are dealing with the data in gigabytes and the other formats. So it is easier to refer to the data lineage and then go to that specific database if that is the right one for you guys. So yeah, Karthik, do you want to talk about the other question? Like, what is the
Yeah.
average time to take
So,
and to complete the
so we
data?
have a slide that we have at the end of this presentation. We are going to talk about the different timelines and pricing strategies based on the business type. So we have a separate slide where we will talk about that in the upcoming slides there. And to answer the data lineage question, again, it's in a simple terms, it's the visualization of your data flow through the system across the organization from the time it is getting created, from the time it's being used. It's the flow of data, across the organization. That's typically data lineage.
Mhm.
Okay.
Next
Coming to
question, please.
data compliance. Yeah, thank you, Sadish. Uh, Great question. On the like how to measure the data success on the compliance, right? So because each industry is different, so depending upon which industry, there are going to be like different compliance standards that we have to follow. So we have to measure the extent of compliance with relevant data protections and privacy regulations. The typical metrics or KPIs is like, policy adherence rate, which is basically the adherence of internal data governance policies and standards, and policy violation rates. So like tracking the number of violations that has been happening, because compliance violations, and it has to be with less within a certain thresholds for each industry and compliances, and whether you have proper compliance training in place for all the employees who are using the data, and the resolution rate whenever you do this periodic audits and find issues, how quickly you will be able to fix that into your into your data architecture or models. So that the resolution rate is very important. And data retention compliance is basically adhering to the data retention policies and legal requirements. And third party compliance is again related to the third party integrations that you have, and basically your legal old compliances. And incident reporting and response time is whenever a compliance issue is reported, how quickly the system is able to capture that, and how quickly we will be able to respond to those kind of compliance incidents. So these I mean, there are lots of KPIs we measure and give a final kind of auditing and recommendations to fix those data compliance issues on the data architecture and models. Okay. So that's the typical, measurement strategies and KPIs, important KPIs to measure any data governance audits. And some of the important tools that we are currently using, or which is popularly used across the, data world, is like Informatica. Informatica is an enterprise level data governance software. It's a basically a ETL tool, and data governance is an aspect inside that can be used as an on-premise or an on the cloud kind of a software. It offers data as well as metadata management, your data lineage, cataloging, visualization. So it kind of comes with a complete package for enterprise level, data governance. Okay. Apache Atlas is an open source kind of a meta management and data governance model tool where, like, for small to medium scale businesses, you can use Apache Atlas with a technical team that can optimize and customize it based on each industry to do a quick data governance audits using Apache Atlas. Okay. Atlassian's flagship product is another data governance tool that it comes with predefined set of policies for certain industries, so and standards, so it makes data governance easier for the industries that it support. Okay. And Overledge, we have one of our partners is an highly adoptable and affordable data governance tool. It configure the solution. You can easily configure it based on your business requirement, and you can track the entire data structure, the directories, data management, policy controls, and role management using Overledge. Okay. And Immuta is another data governance tool that this is primarily focuses on the data management side of things, and data governance policy. Sorry, data compliance policies. So these are some of the critical tools or popular tools that being widely used on the data for data governance audits. And some of the quick case studies are like Airbnb did a complete data governance audit focusing on making a so they wanted to make all the decisions they wanted to make it to be a data driven decisions instead of making any assumptions. So they created a kind of a data governance audit, and based on the audit result, they have democratized the data across all the decision making people, but at the same time they made sure they have, like, restricted access based on what level of access each user will be should have. And that way they were able to make a create a kind of a data solution which through which all the decisions have been made or data driven, right? So that's Airbnb did. And GE Aviation wanted to do data governance for generally to do a data enablement again, like, to create data driven decisions and data enablement. So for on their decision making process and forecasting and all those kind of things. So they created this data governance audits and were able to successfully implement the changes. So creating a sense of a single data source truth and improving their safety and operational efficiency. And Wells Fargo, again, there were lots of, acquisitions happened at Wells Fargo, and different data warehouses being used across different, for different processings. So they converted everything into a single source of truth. For before doing that big project, they did a data governance audit, and with that audit, they were able to create a single source of truth, and based on that, they were able to enhance the data accuracy and reliability. Okay. Any questions here? So now the critical part, most of the organizations, were pretty new or for data governance audits would have the question like, how big is the data governance, and how much time it would take, and what kind of, cost it would take. So from the pricing factor, there are lots of different aspects to it. The first is the size and complexity of the organization. So larger organizations with more complex data environments tend to definitely incur higher cost. So you can, so the organization size can be measured through the complexity of data infrastructures, the different data environments they have, the volume of data they have, the variety of data they have, and the integrations with other third-party systems. All these things has to be considered when you define the scope of the audit or the scalability of the audit. Okay. And the depth of the audit is completely depend upon includes risk assessment, extensive kind of data quality evaluations, compliance requirements, organizational data governance maturity. So what level or depth of audit we have to do, that again depends upon different factors. We have to consider those things to identify the scope and depth of the audit. And the third important part of data governance is audit, whether is the audit is going to be done internally or it's going to be done by an external kind of outside data governance experts. So again, it depends upon certain factors, but the recommended approach is always to do an external kind of an audit so that any any issues which are not being identified by an internal team or which are not being monitored can be easily identified by a external certain processes or our teams. Okay, geographical factors influence your data auditing cost as well as timeline. There might be like cultural and linguistic differences and localization laws. For bigger organization, operating across different geographical regions, so they would have like say if they do have a linguistic difference, like data entered in different languages, right? So but all pointing to the same kind of data, so those kind of things also needs to be considered when you do this kind of data governance audit. So we categorize, this into like three major, sizes, like small, medium, and large. Small is like anyone who is doing a data like a minimum of 10 like different data silos and data elements or environments. So the for doing those kind of audits, it will be like $5,000 to $15,000, and anything about 10 to like 50 silos or data components or data environments, we categorize them into like medium and medium kind of industries. So that's somewhere around 15,000 to $30,000, and anything above that, having more than 50 applications or 50 data environments. So we categorize them into like high or large enterprise level kind of audits. So that's the minimum cost would be like $30,000, and the time period varies between 3 months to even 12, 3 months minimum, and the maximum can go up to the data complexity of the models. Any questions here? Sounds good. Having said that, we have come to the end of this webinar. So we are conducting a kind of a basic level free governance data governance audit for organizations who are interested in 2024. So if anyone is interested in doing a data governance audit for organizations, so you can reach out to us. We'll be sending you a promotion code along with this presentation and recordings. You can go ahead and apply it, and then we can talk to you guys personally. That's it. Any questions? Sounds good. Thanks once again, everyone, for joining the webinar. We will be sharing this presentation to all in the recording. And if you want to have an audit level discussion, please feel free to contact us, and we'll have independent calls, and we can talk about the next steps. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.
Nice. Have a great day, guys.